and a synergy of both. And because they're not separate, they are separate disciplines, but they function, in interaction, and it's the synergy of both that really create the ability to get an opinion, to get a story going, and to get engagement. And so the media, pre-genocide, considered Rwanda a backwater of no consequence. So there was very little information and very little expertise amongst the international journalism world of what was going on in Rwanda. So not only not interest, not much expertise, and at that time you had Cambodia going on, you had Yugoslavia, and so you had more interesting scenarios going on. On the political side, what we found was a non-true commitment of the Security Council into wanting to see the political resolution of this. It would turn to the Secretary General and say, phone them up and tell them that they should stop this. It would, with difficulties, sign up to the renewed mandate, but it had absolutely no desire to deliberately come as a Security Council and establish a final position, including providing the resources to actually be able to implement it. And so it went at it a bit half-hearted. And so with the media not there of any consequence and a half-hearted effort by the political structures, international political structures, this thing was left to fester. Well, there would have to be also a source of electricity, because within 2 days there was no more electricity in the country. So somebody would have had to provide generators or some means, and there was no fuel either. So one thing not to forget, particularly in developing countries, is that if there's no source of generating power, all your electronic systems will die on you. So not an insignificant statement, but to be remembered. Because of now the communications revolution that's going on, would it have been different? Yes, it would have been different. I think that there would have been more tools that we could have used to get the information out. The media became the only weapon I had to shame the international community to react. React both to stop the genocide and ultimately react to curtail its continued actions. And so I was using the journalists that were around and those that were able to get in, that we assisted. But if we had in a country like that, and the reason I mention it as not an insignificant question in any way, shape, or form, because radio was the culture, okay? Not TV, not newspapers, was the radio. Everybody had a radio. It was sort of replaced the old drums, I suppose. And in some places, people felt what came out of the radio was nearly the voice of God. So imagine if you had a country that went wireless with all these modern tools, which they've done. I mean, and it's inexpensive enough over there. How that new information flow might have been able to counter the radio station that was, in fact, calling him to genocide. So you had an internal opportunity maybe that could have permitted the moderates to coalesce, but also it could have been a tool to make it more effective, the genocide. The other side was outside of Rwanda. Could there have been more calls to the outside world, to their problem, and would that have generated more interest in the part of the international community? That side is less sure, because nobody was interested in Rwanda, because there was nothing there for them. And as some of the countries said themselves, the only thing that are here are human beings, and it's overpopulated anyways. I have no problem with other interests, that it be it oil or whatever the strategic resource, or how people feel there's a self-interest there that calls them there maybe more readily than the higher plane humanitarian side, which I believe one day we will continue to strive towards, as NGOs and human rights continue to advance. What I cannot tolerate is indecision, that is not going in, because that is an action. Not acting is an action. So human beings, whether or not there's the influence of strategic resources that may call more attention to them or not, fine. One day, hopefully, we won't need that. Now, in regards to the response, however, that's questionable. I think that we responded well politically and diplomatically by isolating them. I think we responded well economically by putting a squeeze on the companies and trying to isolate it that way. But I think we failed in ultimately calling his bluff when he said that he would crush all the cockroaches that prevent him from staying in power. The day he said that, that meant that his belief in his people had been completely eradicated. I mean, he was no more treating them as human beings. Those were the same words that the extremists used in Rwanda. At that point, we should have deployed on the ground and protected those moderates in those areas that we knew there were moderates and provide a protection force for them. And that way, I think we would have prevented this bloodbath, as ad hoc as it's been, that will now create enormous frictions amongst the Libyans on how they're going to share power because, well, more of us died and more of this died. We could have maybe set an atmosphere of security that the moderates could have brought a better solution sooner. It didn't do it overtly.
Okay.
Nor did Obama do it overtly, who's pushing R2P very strongly, but has a hard problem getting that term across. In fact, even in the UN, with an undersecretary of R2P and genocide prevention, they still got hang-ups. I think what was done was within the construct of R2P, without calling it that. So maybe you call it a will to intervene. Maybe you call it, a will to engage, a will to protect. You call it the sort of more action terms of operationalizing R2P. So you keep the R2P for maybe the UN sort of level of doctrinal sort of backdrop. But if in your nation you don't use the term, but you're actually implementing it and you're operationalizing it, well, stay with that term. I think it's the intent that has to be clarified. And so if the intent, let's put it in an example. The Baha'is in Iran, okay? Is that a genocide? Well, you're curtailing their rights. They're putting them in jail without any reason. They can't profess their religion and on and on and on and on. They're not killing them, but they're making their life impossible to live. Is that a genocide? Is that a mass abuse of human rights? And so I would say yes. Is that then an authority to go in and to resolve it? I say yes. So it doesn't need genocide. It does need mass abuse of human rights. Deliberately implementing mass abuse of human rights. So whether the target has been 1,000 already killed, or whether the target is they're planning to wipe out 500,000 or oppress 500,000, the question is how can you define that intent? And once you've defined the intent, then it's open season to implement. And you don't need to go in with guns first.